7 things even experts get wrong about biotensegrity, but you don't have to. And I've already had a wonderful introduction, so you don't need this screen. So I'll keep going. The scientist Neil deGrasse Tyson says, one of the great challenges in life is to know enough about a subject to think you're right, but not enough about the subject to know you're wrong. So we're going to talk a lot about what's wrong today, but I hope in a positive way. The artist René Magritte caused a big stir in the last century when he made this painting, which is called The Treachery of Images, and which says, this is not a pipe. And you look at it and you think, of course it's a pipe. I can tell it's a pipe. But it's not a pipe. You can't smoke it. It's a painting of a pipe. And so Magritte is inviting us to understand perhaps the distinctions between a representation or a metaphor or a model and the actual thing itself. Correspondingly, George E.P. Box, a statistician, said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And so when we're talking about biotensegrity, we're looking at tensegrity models. This one is by Tom Flemons. And for any given model that we're using, not only do we have to know how is it useful, but we want to also be aware of how is it wrong. And we're not being mean to the model, we're just understanding that it's going to have limitations. So we have these little model cars, but do they run on gasoline? No. Or electricity? No. They have wheels, you can roll them. Can you go pick up your friend at the train? No. Can you get inside? No. So we need to understand the ways in which any model is useful as a representation and the ways in which it is limited. So instead of wrong, we could use the word limited. Now, if you would just look at your hand and think, how could I make a model of my hand? How could I make a representation of my hand? And of course, there are many ways that this can be done. And depending on what it is you want to convey or express, you would use different versions of the expression of the hand. Do you want an anatomical, slices and such sort of analysis? Do you want someone to be able to count on their hand? Are you doing palm reading or a health reading? Do you just want a sculpture like Monsieur Rodin's sculpture at the bottom? Do you want a robotic hand? So depending on what it is you're trying to express or find or look for, you will create different models. And then when you look to a model to learn, different models, even of the same thing, can express different things. When we study biotensegrity, we end up using many different models. And this is why. Because all models are wrong, but some are useful, we end up needing not just the tensegrities that you're familiar with, but a bunch of other models as well, be it bubbles or Jacob's ladders or building with toothpicks and such, or the Hoberman sphere. We need to look to more things than we might imagine, because true biological organisms, modeling all of biological life through all time, is not even possible. So it's a matter of what can we do to better understand, bit by bit, each model showing us a little peek here and a little peek there. And so when I talk to you about the things that even the experts get wrong about biotensegrity, but you don't have to, I am doing this after reading what a lot of different people have written or said, and so many people get the wrong impression. And you are studying today with some of the best people. I mean, you have Kutu, you have you have Cristhian. These are people with excellent understanding about biotensegrity. Unfortunately, not everyone who is teaching or writing about biotensegrity has this level of understanding. So this is the motivation for my presentation. This is the Superstar sculpture by Kenneth Snelson. These models were made by Steve Levin, Dr. Levin. And the misunderstandings that I'm going to talk about today have to do with misunderstanding the limits of the different kinds of models. And this one is all with metal. Those are metal chains for those interlinked tensegrities. Okay, so my thing number one of my 7 is I don't really need to have a tensegrity. Graham Scar went to an international conference a week long in Italy, with mostly focused on engineering in September. He presented on biotensegrity, but most people were presenting on engineering. And I asked him when he got back, so had everybody had physical experience with a tensegrity model? And to my mind, you need an intimate physical experience with these models. And both these models in the picture were made by Graham. And he said he usually, when he goes to these things, he brings a little kit along so that everybody can make models. He can pass out the kits and teach everybody. But he didn't do that this time because he figured these were all professionals from mathematics and engineering who are working with tensegrity. They would all have already had the experience. But he did bring some models with him, and he was surprised at the number of people who had never held a tensegrity. This is Buckminster Fuller with a tensegrity sphere. I feel like if you're talking about tensegrity but you've never experienced one physically, learned what it has to teach you through your own body, through your own fingertips. It's like, could you read a book on swimming and then be ready to jump out of the boat? If you read a book on swimming, you really don't know the experience of swimming. So I'm going to encourage everyone to jump in the water, to build a tensegrity yourself, because my opinion is that if you're going to study this, you really do need to physically experience a tensegrity. Tensegrities are only about 100 years old at most that we know of, and their behavior is different from other structures that you've experienced. The mathematicians are still working out the math. The engineers are still working out the engineering, still unpacking this amazing innovation. Now, here's where I get very controversial. The second one is a tensegrity with stretchy cables will work. And the thing is that for modeling biotensegrity, cables that are stretchy are very, very useful for many models. And Fernando's made incredible ones, and so has Cristhian, and I hope you get to see all of those. But our foundational model for biology, our central model, is the classical tensegrity as defined by Snelson and Fuller, where the cables do not stretch. And stretchy cable models are very useful. Okay, I'm not saying they don't have value, but I want you to understand our fundamental model, which has 6 struts and non-extensible cables. Part of this has to do with energy efficiency. Okay, so some of you may have a rubber band somewhere around handy, and I'm going to do a little experiential thing with you. If you take the rubber band and stretch it and put it to your lip,
I'm recording the sound, and
just feel that.
More than halfway through, 2/3 of the way through.
And then let the stretch come out. Touch it to your lip again. Do you notice the temperature change? When the rubber band is stretched, it's working very hard. It's expending energy, and it gets warmer. When the rubber band is released, it's a cooler temperature, and our lips are very sensitive to temperature. This experiment comes from the physicist Richard Feynman. And biological organisms are energy efficient. They follow the second law of thermodynamics. So when we go to study biology, we need to make sure we have an energy efficient model. The 6-strut tensegrity that has non-extensible cables is important. And it also important is that the struts don't bend. The struts need to resist compression. If they were bendy, they wouldn't be resisting compression to the extent that they're able to bend. The cables need to be non-stretchy. To the extent that they stretch, they're not able to resist tension. So the struts are resisting compression. The cables are resisting tension. And so you get the balance in the model. And you get these amazing properties that you can feel, an in, out, around expansion and condensation that's helical and auxetic, omnidirectional. It's a little harder to feel that if you have a stretchy cable model. So again, not that they're not valuable, they are, the stretchy cable models, but you need to know for any model, how is it wrong, how is it useful? I've tried to explain how the non-extensible cable 6-strut model is useful, and there are actually many other aspects of it. The fact that it's spherical, which is why we use a 6 strut, not a 3 strut tensegrity for modeling biology. And it goes on, but I'm just trying to give you an overview. Now here's my number 3. The struts are the bones, and the cables are the muscles or ligaments or tendons or fascia, depending on which person you're talking about or thing you're citing.
No, I recorded myself.
Again, this is not exactly wrong. As a matter of fact, when Steve saw the needle tower on the National Mall in Washington, D.C.,
Well, I've only got 7.
it helped him understand how the muscles how the bones in the spine could be separated, could have space between them.
No, I'm sorry.
But if you stop there and you say, okay, the struts are the bones, the cables are the fascia, the tendons and the ligaments and the muscles, it's kind of like you've come to the door of the house, but you never really went inside. This is a departure point. And both of these models, Alfred that we saw a minute ago and this one, are by Tom Flemons. And Fernando Tejero, who's with us today, has made incredible, his little doggy, I hope you see it, and how it moves. And it has stretchy cables because that's what allows it to do those incredible movements. But again, for modeling, we're not just trying to model humans or mammals here. We're trying to use biotensegrity to understand all biological life through all times. That includes algae and slime molds and diatoms and dinosaurs. And we have to be able to understand them all through this model. And of course, slime molds don't have ligaments and tendons or nervous systems. Okay, my number 4 is that it's all about tension. We get so excited about the fact that we're sort of turning up the volume on what happens in a system that has these tension cables on the outside and the compression struts internal to it for its volumetric stability, that we can forget about the compression sometimes. And we don't want to. There is no tension without compression. There is no compression without tension. They are interlinked. If you hook your fingers and you pull your arms apart, you can feel tension in the system. But if you didn't have the rest of you to provide the compression to support the tension, you wouldn't be able to do this. So it's a tenso-compressional system. And then some people say it's all about the fascia. Biotensegrity is all about fascia. Fascia is all about biotensegrity. This particular shot is from the work of Jean-Claude Guimberteau. I highly recommend you see it. And you see Strolling Under the Skin, his film, and look at his work. And he has 12 lectures that are available now that I highly recommend as well. But if we only look at the fascia, we're missing that which creates the fascia. Fascia is an aspect, it's a part of an organism, of mammalian organisms, and perhaps other species as well. But it's important to us as humans, and for anyone who's working in the therapeutic world, which we've seen amazing work today from Kutu and from Fur. It's really important to understand things about the fascia. We can use biotensegrity as a lens, as a framework, to help us understand things about the fascia. But biotensegrity has a wider scope. It also has to explain why when you get up from the grass, after you've been sitting on the ground, you can see where you were sitting, but if you come back an hour later, the grass has stood up again, all those little blades of grass, and you can't tell where you were. We look to biotensegrity to understand not just animals, but as I said, plants, fungi, all life through all time. So we just want to keep in mind the limits of the model. Some people think that biotensegrity is all about human biomechanics, and we saw some incredibly wonderful insights from Fur today on human biomechanics. Biotensegrity can inform our understanding of human biomechanics. But it's about much more than that. And so we can study biotensegrity and get these insights. But again, if you just pick up a little piece and say, okay, now I understand biotensegrity, I think you're missing out on a lot of wonderful stuff. I've been studying this for over 15 years, and Steve's been studying it for 50 years. We are nowhere near the end of the information. And anybody who's listening to this now, as I said, tensegrity itself, which is still not completely understood, is 100 years old at most. We don't understand tensegrity yet in any full way, let alone biotensegrity. How using these tensegrity structures and learning from how they behave and move can help us get insights about what's going on in living organisms. And my last one is, by doing the right activities, the right exercises, the right training, you can fix your biotensegrity. The reason this thinking is limited or wrong is that every living organism, we're theorizing when we study biotensegrity, every living organism has tensegral structures at all scale levels, from the nano to the macro. And so the person in the iron lung, or the person who has parts of their body that are missing or not movable, or has had parts removed, whatever it is, all these organisms are tensegral organisms, are biotensegral organisms. Just as a jellyfish is, just as a bacteria is. You don't lose your biotensegrity. It's not that. It's not the kind of thing you can lose. It is a perspective, a concept, a framework that we use to help us understand all biological organisms better. Now, can you, through your understanding of biotensegrity, get new and wonderful insights on how you might be able to improve an exercise regimen or movement training? Absolutely. But that's a slightly different thing. So now you know these are my 7 points. You do need a tensegrity. Build one today if you haven't already. The fundamental model has inextensible cables, but that doesn't mean stretchy cable models are bad. It just means that we need to understand the limits that are inherent in the structure when we see these little stretchy cable people, humans or animals or pelvises or anything like that. We are focusing on one scale level of the body, and we can't focus on all scale levels at once. If you think the struts are the bones and the cables are the muscles, ligaments, tendons, and if you think that's the end of the story, I would say you're only in the ticket line. Now come and see the movie. It's a tenso-compressional system that we're studying. So it's not only about tension, because you cannot have tension without compression. And it's not only all about fascia. Can it inform our understanding of fascia? Absolutely. And a lot of wonderful work has been done with that. But biotensegrity itself has a broader scope beyond animals. It's not all about human biomechanics. It can inform our understanding of human movement and biomechanics. But again, biotensegrity itself is just as concerned with an amoeba as it is with how we run or walk. And in truth, you really can't fix your biotensegrity. If we are right about this theory of biotensegrity, if that's what's going on in living organisms, that they have these multifractal, multi-scale level arrangements that follow the force vector signatures and interactions of tensegrity structures, then that is always in play. And we are soft matter systems. We have transmutable material that we're made of, soft matter, transmutable material, such that something that's performing compression at one point can perform tension at another. And at different scale levels, all of these reconfigurations and transformations are happening at speeds we can't imagine and in numbers we can't imagine. So you can't break your biotensegrity and you can't fix it. And that's it. Thank you very much.